everybody. My name is Jessica Everett. I am the STEM teacher at Hardin Valley Elementary School. I am very excited today to present a lesson to you of review on landforms. And this is for second grade, week 2 science. To do today's activities, you are going to need some resources. Those resources are available at the Knox County Schools website under the Student Resources tab and inside the Week 2 packet. If you do not have access to a computer or printer, printed copies will be available to you for pickup on Monday mornings from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. at meal distribution sites. A list of these sites can be found at the Knox County Schools webpage. So today's objective is to review land formations and how they are made visible on maps. We will know that we are successful when we can name and identify various types of landforms. So looking on the bottom of your screen, you can see there are 4 very distinct different landforms. We are so fortunate to have an Earth that looks so different depending on where we are. These land features and landforms are what help make our Earth an interesting place for both cartographers and the rest of us. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So I want you to think about some of the places you may have visited to start today. Maybe you went on a field trip, maybe you were on a family vacation, maybe you moved across the country and drove all the way. How did that location look different than where you are now? I know for me, I can think off the top of my head of some family trips to the beach. The beach is much sandier than East Tennessee. It's much flatter than East Tennessee, and it has a lot less vegetation, less trees are along the beach. So to me, it's very different than where I live here in East Tennessee. So we're going to talk about a few different land features that you may or may not have seen before. And that's just because you've got to know something exists to know it's out there. So let's start talking first about the top left-hand screen area. That is a beach. Now beaches are located around the coast, touching the oceans. They're low-lying areas. Actually usually at sea level, sometimes below, depending on the beach area. They're sandy. They don't have a lot of trees. People tend to go there because they love the water. So those are beaches. That's a landform. Another landform is a lake. Now, a lake is a large body of fresh water. It is usually found in a low-lying area. It's where streams and rivers tend to empty. The next picture is actually of a mountain. It's one of my favorite mountains. It's the Matterhorn in the Alps. Mountains are unique landforms because they jut out from the Earth's surface. We can see them from a long distance away. Usually they're very beautiful to look at from a long distance, but mountains are pretty cool. We've got a lot of them here in East Tennessee. The feature here in the middle is a sand dune. Now, sand dunes are unique because they're actually formed by wind depositing sand into these large walls of sand, and they have these beautiful designs and patterns on them because the way the wind blows the sand into place. So the wind actually helps form these landforms. The last feature is a stream that we're going to talk about on this slide. And I love streams because one of my favorite things is when we talk about how to tell the difference between a stream and a river. A river is very wide and deep and usually has a current to it. A stream is pretty narrow, not very deep, pretty shallow. A good way to tell the two apart is a stream is much easier to cross than a river. A river with that current could cause you to have a lot of problems trying to get across. It could pull you down the river. So streams are much smaller than rivers. We're going to take a look at this map of East Tennessee. It has a lot of different features, but the one I want to talk to you about mostly, we're going to highlight here in just a minute. So cartographers are special people who help create maps. Now, they have a lot of work cut out for them when they create maps because the Earth is such a unique surface. It's got all of these amazing features, and if that's not enough, humans add even more to it. So how do cartographers begin to understand how to show us on a piece of paper a mountain? Mountains stick out from the surface of the Earth. Maps are flat. So cartographers figured out a way around it. They decided that using colors could help them to show the difference in elevation. So if we look at this map, the lighter tan areas are actually lower than the darker areas. So the darker areas of our map actually show mountains, specifically the Cumberland Mountains and the Blue Ridge Mountains, piggybacked by the Smoky Mountains. So we're able to see exactly where those mountains are because the cartographer used a different color to show us the difference. Another feature that a cartographer highlights in their maps are actually our waterways. And specifically in this map, we can see those waterways highlighted in blue that indicate rivers. They actually even put the labels for the names of the rivers on them, so the Holston River and the Tennessee River are listed on there for us to know where they are. There's another area on this map that is actually not labeled, but it is a very large landform and very important to us here in Knoxville. That is a valley. And valleys are important because without them, we wouldn't be able to live where we live. So we live in a valley between the Cumberland Mountains and the Blue Ridge Mountains or the Smoky Mountains. And so that's what helps make our terrain unique. So let's go ahead and get into our activity today. At the top of your paper, you're going to notice that there are 3 boxes along with a word bank. I want you to take a minute to try to figure out which each type of landform is. So in our word bank, it says plain, mountain, and river. Try to look at those images and figure out which landform you see in each box. Okay? So let's talk a little bit more about how we can describe Earth's surface. We talked about how cartographers create maps to help us understand them better. Well, maps are a huge part and way for us to understand the surface of the Earth and how it looks, how it appears, and how we can function with it. So we use maps to understand the world better and describe the different places on Earth. Maps can give us a lot of information. They can show how places are divided into countries, states, or cities. They can also show the different landforms. They help us decide and find where we may like to visit depending on what we are looking for. If we wanted to visit places for boating, where on the map should we go? So what color does a cartographer use generally to show waterways on a map? On this map, again, we can tell that the color is going to be blue. So any of those blue areas would be areas that would be good for boating. If we were looking for a place to boat, we'd want to try to find an area that has that blue line, those rivers or lakes in there. So let's get to our activity today. This is exciting. You are going to need some materials for this activity. You're going to need a towel or a sheet. You're going to want a pretty big towel if you're using a towel. I used a sheet myself. I just found one in my closet. You're going to need books or objects to stack. I actually use books and a ball. We're going to use the landform labels cut out from your resource packet. So you'll need to cut those out and get them ready to go. You're going to need crayons, a sheet of paper, and 3 blue flexible objects. That can be anything from a t-shirt, it can be a blue fruit roll-up, it can be a scarf. I used a sock and tissue paper. It can be anything you can find in your house that's flexible and blue because we're going to use it to make some waterways. So step 1, we're going to be creating our own terrain today. And to do that, you're going to need to lay out your sheet or towel on the floor or a tabletop. Then when you get it laid out, I want you to look at it. There are no features. It's just a flat sheet or a flat towel. When an area has no real features, it's just a large flat space, we call that a plain. So what you have right now is a plain. We're going to change that in step 2 though. So let's go ahead and get into it. Step 2, I want you to use books or the other objects you have and stack them underneath of your plain in different places. So now we don't have a plain anymore. We might have one area that's a plain, but now we've got some things rising up out of the surface of the earth that have higher elevations. Step 3, we're going to use our 3 blue objects to create a lake in one of the low-lying areas of our terrain. Then we're going to create a stream and a river leading into the lake with our other two blue objects. Now remember, a stream is smaller than a river. So we're going to have to think about our objects pretty carefully. I ended up using a blue t-shirt for my lake and a sock for my river. So think about the size of your blue object when you're deciding on what should be the river, what should be the lake, and what should be the stream. Step 4, I want you to examine your terrain. Use those detective eyes and look at that surface. I want you to place the correct labels on each landform. So looking over your surface, what do you see? Do you see mountains? Do you see valleys, rivers, lakes, streams, plains? Make sure you get those labels on there. I'm going to go ahead and show you an example of what my terrain looked like when I made it. So here it is. I've used a sheet for the terrain, and I've stacked my books up to create 2 mountains. I've got my valley between those 2 mountains, and through my valley runs my stream. That's made out of tissue paper, twisted together. And then I've got my river, which I used a sock, and a lake, which I used a blue t-shirt. Next to the lake is a large flat area with no defined features, so that is my plain. The next part's where it gets really cool. Now you get to map your terrain. So using your paper and crayons, create a map of your terrain. On your map, be sure to label all of the landforms. For extra fun, you can create a name for your terrain and write a description of the available resources that could be found there. So maybe you have some unique animals that live in your terrain, or some plants that might not be found here in East Tennessee in your terrain. You get to come up with all those things. So here's an example of my map. I showed the mountains, not with a different color, but instead I just drew the mountains onto my map. You can see my stream, my valley between them labeled, my river, my lake, and my plain. Now I made my terrain into an island. You can do that, or you can leave it all as land. But you're going to want to make sure you label all of those landforms so that if somebody was exploring the terrain that you created today, they would be able to find their way around. That's exactly what a cartographer does. They create these maps so that we can understand the surface of the earth better. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. We're going to take a look again at how you can find the resources that you might need. The resources are available on the Knox County Schools website under the Student Resources tab and inside the Week 2 packet. Again, if you do not have a computer or access to a printer, printed copies will be available to you for pickup on Monday mornings from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. at meal distribution sites. Those sites can be found on the Knox County Schools webpage. Thank you guys for joining me for today's activity and learning. I hope you guys stay happy, healthy, engaged, and active. We can't wait to see you guys back, hopefully sooner than later. You are so missed by your teachers. We love you. Bye, guys.